Modern life feels fast. Too fast. Everyone seems to be moving somewhere, achieving something, reaching milestones you were told matter. And somewhere along the way, many people develop a quiet but constant feeling. I am behind. Behind in career. Behind in money. Behind in relationships. Behind in life. This feeling is so common that we treat it as normal, almost expected. But it is not a personal failure. It is not a lack of discipline or ambition. It is something much older, much deeper. The fear of being left behind did not begin in modern society. It began long before cities, schools, and careers existed. In ancient human history, falling behind was not emotional. It was physical. If you could not keep up with the group, you were exposed. If you were slower, weaker, injured, or simply different, you were vulnerable. The group moved together for a reason. Together meant safety. Alone meant danger. To be left behind was not symbolic. It meant hunger, cold, predators, death. That fear shaped the human nervous system. It taught the brain that separation equals risk. And once a lesson like that is learned over thousands of years, it does not disappear just because the world changes. It adapts. Today, the group is no longer a tribe walking through the wilderness. It is society. And society moves through timelines. Finish school by this age. Start a career by that age. Achieve success by another age. Build a family. Buy a home. Be stable. Be productive. These timelines feel invisible, but they are powerful. When you follow them, you feel relief. When you fall outside them, anxiety appears. Not because something bad has happened yet, but because the brain is reacting to an ancient signal. You are losing synchronization with the group. In the past, synchronization was about movement and survival. Today, it is about status and progress. But the emotional mechanism is the same. This is why comparison feels so painful. Humans did not evolve to compare for motivation. They evolved to compare for positioning, to know where they stand relative to others. Because position once determined access to food, protection, and mates. Social media did not create this instinct. It simply made it constant. Endless reference points. Endless reminders of where you are and where you are not. In ancient times, you compared yourself to a few dozen people. Today, you compare yourself to thousands. The brain did not evolve for that scale. So it stays in a state of low-level alarm. Always checking. Always measuring. Always asking, am I still acceptable? This is why being behind feels urgent, even when there is no real deadline. It feels dangerous, even when you are objectively safe. The fear is not rational, but it is logical, according to ancient rules. Society reinforces this fear without noticing it. Schools rank students. Jobs rank performance. Social systems reward speed and visibility. The faster you move, the more valuable you appear. Slowness becomes suspicious. Pauses become gaps that must be explained. But in nature, speed was never the only strategy. Some survived by moving fast. Others survived by moving carefully. Modern systems often forget this. The pressure to keep up creates a strange paradox. People rush not toward meaning, but away from fear. They chase milestones not because they want them, but because standing still feels unacceptable. In ancient tribes, standing still while others moved meant separation. Today, standing still while others advance feels like failure. Different context. Same emotion. And here is the quiet truth. Society rarely asks whether the direction itself makes sense. It only asks whether you are moving. This is why burnout is so common. People push themselves not because they are inspired, but because stopping feels dangerous. Rest feels like falling behind. Reflection feels like risk. The fear of being left behind has learned to wear new masks. Productivity, hustle, optimization, improvement. These words sound positive, but they often hide anxiety underneath. Ancient humans feared being eaten. Modern humans fear being irrelevant. Both fears activate the same stress response. But the world has changed in one important way. Survival no longer depends on perfect synchronization. You can slow down without dying. You can choose different paths without being exiled. The danger feels real, but it is mostly internal. Awareness changes the relationship. When you understand that the pressure you feel is ancient, you stop taking it personally. You realize that your nervous system is trying to protect you using outdated information. It is reacting to a world that no longer exists. This does not mean you should abandon ambition or responsibility. It means you can separate movement from fear, choice from panic. Being behind is not a universal truth. It is a relative judgment created by timelines that humans invented to manage uncertainty. There is no single pace for a species that survived through diversity. Some paths look slow because they are invisible. Some progress happens inward, where society does not measure. The fear of being left behind once kept humans alive. Today, it often keeps them anxious. The question is no longer, am I ahead or behind? The question is, am I moving because I choose to, or because I am afraid to stop? That difference is the beginning of freedom. As the first winter tightened its grip, the small settlement realized that survival was no longer about hope or belief, but about discipline, cooperation, and sacrifice. The cold did not care who you were or why you came. It froze the ground, cracked wooden walls, and turned simple mistakes into fatal ones. Food supplies vanished faster than expected, and every meal became a quiet calculation of how many days might still remain. Hunger changed people. It sharpened tempers, slowed movements, and stripped away illusions. Some colonists whispered that the land itself rejected them, that this place was never meant to be home. Others refused to speak at all, conserving energy as if silence could save strength. Inside the settlement, leadership was tested in ways no meeting or plan could prepare for. Decisions about rationing, work assignments, and medical care carried invisible weight, because every choice helped one person while potentially condemning another. There were moments when the settlers argued fiercely, not out of hatred, but fear. Fear of starvation. Fear of sickness. Fear that everything they had crossed the ocean for was slowly slipping away. Yet even in this pressure, something unexpected happened. People began to rely on each other not because they were told to, but because isolation meant death. Shared labor replaced individual ambition. Fires were kept burning not for comfort, but for morale. Outside the settlement, the world watched quietly. The native tribes who had lived on this land for generations understood the rhythm of the seasons in a way the newcomers never could. They knew which plants survived frost, how to store food, how to read the sky for warnings. At first, the settlers saw them with suspicion, unsure whether help would come or danger. History had taught them to be cautious. But hunger has a way of dissolving pride, and desperation opens doors that confidence keeps closed. When contact finally turned into communication, it was not built on trust, but necessity. The knowledge shared was simple, practical, and life-saving. How to plant crops that matched the soil. How to preserve food instead of consuming it immediately. How to hunt without exhausting the land. These lessons were not dramatic or heroic, yet they changed everything. Slowly, the settlers began to understand that survival was not about conquering the environment, but listening to it. The land was not an enemy. It was indifferent. And indifference could be negotiated with respect and patience. Spring did not arrive suddenly. It crept in quietly, almost cautiously, as if testing whether the settlement deserved another chance. Snow melted into mud. Frozen ground softened. The air carried a different sound, birds returning, water moving again. With it came relief, but also memory. Too many faces were missing. Too many graves marked the cost of ignorance and overconfidence. Gratitude, when it came, was not joyful at first. It was heavy. It carried the weight of those who did not survive to see the thaw. By the time the harvest approached, the settlers were no longer the same people who had arrived months earlier. They had learned that abundance feels different after scarcity, and that food tastes richer when you understand how easily it can disappear. The meal that would later be remembered as the first Thanksgiving was not planned as a celebration of victory. It was a pause, a breath, a moment of acknowledgement that survival was not guaranteed and never would be. The gathering included those who taught them how to endure, those who shared knowledge rather than guarding it, and those who understood that gratitude is not about having everything, but about recognizing what was given and what was earned through hardship. This moment did not erase conflict, injustice, or the painful chapters that would follow. History did not become kind overnight. but it created a symbol, one rooted not in perfection, but in survival through cooperation. Thanksgiving was not born from comfort. It was born from lost learning, and the realization that gratitude is most powerful when it is practiced, not proclaimed. And perhaps that is why, centuries later, the story still matters. Not because it was flawless, but because it reminds us that even in the harshest conditions, humans can choose connection over isolation, humility over dominance, and gratitude over entitlement. And so, the story does not truly end with a meal or a table surrounded by people. It ends with a realization. Gratitude is not a feeling that appears when life becomes easy. It is a decision made when life is difficult. The first Thanksgiving was not about abundance, decorations, or tradition. It was about survival against odds that never cared whether these people lived or died. It was about admitting weakness, accepting help, and learning that independence without wisdom leads to collapse. What makes this story powerful, even after 400 years, is not its simplicity, but its honesty. It reminds us that progress is fragile, that comfort can disappear faster than we expect, and that no society survives alone. Every generation believes it stands on solid ground, until circumstances prove otherwise. The settlers learned this lesson through hunger and loss. We often learn it through crisis, uncertainty, and sudden change. Today, Thanksgiving is celebrated with full tables and familiar rituals, yet its original meaning is easy to forget. Gratitude was never meant to be passive. It was meant to be practiced through respect, cooperation, and memory. Memory of who helped us when we were unprepared. Memory of what happens when pride replaces understanding. Memory of the cost paid by those who never made it to the next season. If this story teaches us anything, it is that gratitude is strongest when it is quiet, earned, and shared. Not shouted, not displayed, not taken for granted. 400 years later, the world is different, but human nature is not. We still face moments where survival depends not on strength alone, but on humility and connection. And perhaps that is the real legacy of the first Thanksgiving. Not a holiday, not a tradition, but a reminder. A reminder that gratitude is not about what we have today, but about recognizing how easily it could have been lost, and choosing again and again to value what truly keeps us alive.